It's now an essential requirement for politicians to be on social media. The aim seemingly to be heavy on vibes and light on policy. And this is very much in evidence in the US presidential campaign. So is politics being memeified? And is that necessarily a bad thing? We're joined by Joanne Sweeney from the Digital Training Institute. Afternoon, Joanne.
Hi, Sean. How are you?
Yeah. So why are politicians on social media? Is it just to be down with the kids?
Absolutely not. They know that they have to be on social media because their voters are there. And I think it is possible to turn social media fans into voters. And we're in election season right across the world. And of course, we've got the American elections coming up in November. We're just out of local and European elections. And there's a general election here on the horizon sometime within the next 5 to 6 months.
Yeah. So but the way that would be approached on social media, is that different from the pitch that a candidate might make at your doorstep or indeed put on a leaflet of some sort?
Well, let's face it, when you pitch a voter at the doorstep, you might, if you're lucky, have 60 seconds to 2 minutes, depending on how much conversation they want to have with you. Maybe they haven't seen you in person ever, or maybe they haven't seen you in 5 years, because that's a complaint that politicians often get. And what social media does, it gives you the opportunity to tell your story, explain the policy, prove that you're listening to the people, regurgitate what the people are saying to you, offer solutions, and you can do that on an ongoing basis. So what it does is it gives you brand awareness, it gives you political longevity, and it also gives you an opportunity to listen to what the issues are. Trending and going viral is a whole other strategy, but it certainly shouldn't be your singular strategy as a politician.
Right. Okay. So, but I used to just, do many politicians do that? They actually interact with voters or potential voters on social media, and is it actually them rather than some 17-year-old they've employed?
So let me say that I've noticed a trend in recent months where there are potentially less politicians engaging with their voters because the level of vitriol has increased. Some politicians are now turning off their comments on X, and only people who are mentioned in the post, for example, can interact. X is probably the platform where we have most vitriol and misinformation. You step over to Instagram, for example, you know, people are there to break up their day, see lifestyle content, and maybe don't engage as much. TikTok, on the other hand, massive reach, massive potential views. But again, the commentary can be quite negative. I don't think that politicians are interacting per se compared to influencers or maybe commercial brands, but they can actually listen. They can listen to what's coming into the comments and what feedback they're getting and use that to inform their next piece of content to actually respond potentially to criticisms. Yeah,
but one could be forgiven for having the impression, and you know, I'm sure you're aware of the Kamala Harris campaign and being associated with Brat and all that. That seemed to me more like Kamala's just hipper rather than Brat actually meant anything within the context of her political campaign.
Yeah, so this is called social association, and I think her social media team know exactly what they're doing here. So you've got the Brat Summer, you've got the Swifties. So these are already huge communities that are on Gen Z platforms like TikTok. And let's face it, the Gen Zers in the US cumulatively are 41 million voters. And so being relatable is what a politician needs to do. Kamala was able to do that by aligning herself with these communities. So I think her campaign team knew what they were doing. Another thing that I would say on that point is that the timing of it was good because she was recently announced as the presidential candidate. She hasn't yet gone into those tough interviews. She's having one, I believe, this week, and then she'll have one with Donald Trump in the coming weeks. And so the vibe will change because if she's getting down with the kids, as you say, when she's getting into those serious issues, that might not land. So the timing of your content and the context of your content is equally important.
Yeah, well, they were probably pretty fortunate about the Brat thing in the sense that it was kind of given to them on a plate.
Well, absolutely. And the research has shown that somebody ran the analytics on it. I think it was potentially with Storyful, and they saw that the endorsements by the Clintons and by the Obamas didn't result in as much uplift and engagement on TikTok compared to the Brat Summer and the Swiftie movement.
Yeah, well, that makes more sense because, you know, all those old Democrats, you'd expect them to do that. But this, but I suppose a certain demographic wouldn't expect Charlie XCX to weigh in on something like this. And suddenly they gave us a freshness.
And it's quite remarkable that we actually have individuals with such high profiles, and they're not political, they're entertainers, they're celebrities, but they're coming out and they're calling their position. They're telling us what side of the pitch they are standing on and whom they're supporting. And I watched an interview with Oprah Winfrey only over the weekend, and she was asked, is it dangerous for you to be coming out and supporting Kamala Harris? And she said, well, guess what? America helped me become Oprah Winfrey, and we were the country of dreams. And she goes, I think people expect me to come out and to put my cards down, and that's what I'm doing. So there's a little bit of a shift here, and I'm not sure we'd see it in an Irish context, but it's becoming a theme in the US for sure.
Yeah, no, and in that context, in the sense that, as we all know, Biden debated with Donald Trump. It was a disaster, and it was a turning point in that campaign in the sense of an awful lot of people felt Biden should step down, which he eventually did. Would it be possible that might be a social media turning point? Say, for instance, if Taylor Swift decides to back Kamala Harris publicly, could that be a turning point? Would it have that? I imagine it would have an enormous impression.
Well, I mean, all you have to look at is the turnout and the exposure that her Eras tour got across Europe over the summer months was absolutely massive. She is a movement in herself, and relatability is the secret sauce on social media. If I had one piece of advice for any politician, it is be yourself, but be relatable to the voter that you are chasing. And of course, politicians can't be all things to all people. So if Taylor goes out and takes, the Democrat side of the pitch, then absolutely that's going to be a social media turning point. But the other thing that I would say is politicians are also very aware of negative social media turning points. When you get close to voting day and you're riding nice in the polls, you've got momentum, you're nearly over the line, the one thing that you do not want to happen is to have a social media faux pas and that corner and that turning point being a negative one, because your campaign could be usurped. So we know, mainstream media, how important journalists are in asking the tough questions, but you have the citizen journalist and the citizen voice and the voter watching for these micro moments. And these micro moments could be as short as like 20, 30 seconds of a politician putting a foot wrong. So it's a nerve-wracking time to be a politician, I can tell you.
Yeah, and in the Irish context, Joanne, are there any Irish politicians who do this well? Simon Harris was called the TikTok Taoiseach when he took over the leadership of Fine Gael, and he seems to have used that platform a lot, though there seems to be mixed reviews in the sense some people think it's very cringe.
Well, listen, I mean, if you look at us as Irish people, we can get very annoyed or very uncomfortable if somebody is putting themselves out there a lot and showing up every day on our phone, on our feed. We can kind of get the ick because we're like, oh, my goodness, there he is again. But by and large, for me, as kind of like somebody who writes about this stuff, for me, it's about transparency, accountability, and showing up. And that's what politicians need to do. So I would always say, you exist in the public interest. You've been voted in by the people. You need not go away now that you've been elected. You need to show up and tell them what you're doing. And that's what Simon Harris did. And his simple strategy is, and I'm just talking about it from the outside and watching him, is that he showed up every day. He picked up his phone, he opened up Instagram and TikTok, and he spoke to the people. And that's simply how you do it. Accountability, transparency, consistency. And then that builds relatability, because he's not standing with a whole host of dignitaries that me and you would never be with. He's sitting down, he's talking about, where he's been, disability or housing. And again, the politics aside, it's just about showing up and being answerable to the people. And I think social media provides that platform both for the citizen but also for the politician.
Joanne, thanks a million for speaking with us today. That was Joanne Sweeney there, as you heard there, an author and also the founder of the Digital Training Institute.